Hi everybody, my name is Stefano Bakari and I chose a research track for my project, and my topic is identifying the socioeconomic factors that drive technical proficiency among the elderly. So one of the things that motivated me to do research in this area was a particular paper that I read early on in the semester where the researchers were looking at MOOC's engagement of the elderly population using course offerings that are more geared towards the older segment of the student population. And one of the conclusions they came to is that there really isn't a lot of research or data available surrounding elderly population and their interaction with educational technology. There's not a lot of research done regarding what drives their success or failure rates. So I kind of wanted to contribute a little bit to this domain. Another thing that motivated me is the realization that if technology isn't ubiquitous already, it's becoming more and more the primary way to connect with people and in all facets of life. One of those being education, and this course is a really good example of that. And I do believe that courses or programs like these are going to be the norm in the future. We're also looking to patients to manage their own healthcare using online PHRs, and that's going to require some basic knowledge of computers or some basic level of technical proficiency, right? Um, and the elderly, that's a growing segment of the population. Baby boomers are moving more and more into this age range, and so there's going to be increasing opportunity in this area, right? And more of a personal anecdote. One of the biggest things that motivated me was, I work for a telecom company, and when we talk about self-service and self-service failure rates for our customers, we kind of, take failure rates for the elderly as a given, and there's really not a lot of discussion surrounding how we can improve or how we can serve this segment of our customer base a little bit better. So I definitely think there's very little support for the elderly population. I think that this is kind of common within all technological industries. Now, the goal of my research was to identify which socioeconomic factors have the biggest impact on technical proficiency. I narrowed down those socioeconomic factors into income, education, and occupation. And more specifically, I just wanted to know whether that occupation was technical or non-technical. So, not only identifying which socioeconomic factors have the biggest impact, I wanted to determine, if they had any impact at all, right? And more importantly, I just wanted to set a foundation for future research done in this area. So for any students that take future iterations of this course and wanted to contribute, I definitely wanted to leave a baseline for them to kind of work off of and continue to contribute in this domain. So from a high level, my approach has two main components. The first being pulling all of the subjects into their respective socioeconomic categories, and the second was to measure their technical proficiency. Now, I thought the best way to measure technical proficiency was to use a computer proficiency test. These are tests that are administered by colleges to assess basic computer skills, and it's typically used for course placement or course credit. Now, I didn't have access to a computer proficiency test, so what I did was design my own quiz based on questions that are very similar to what you would see on the CPT. Now, the CPT assesses, file management skills, word processing skills, spreadsheets, access database knowledge, and internet browser knowledge. And so I scoured online sources to find questions that would best mimic what you would see on the CPT, and then I administered that quiz using the same Google form as my demographic questionnaire. Now, once the responses were submitted, I split subjects into different categories. So, for example, when I looked into education, I split them into groups of subjects who didn't have a degree versus subjects who did have a degree, right? Or subjects who had less than a bachelor's versus those who had bachelor's and higher. And then I did subsequently an analysis of their average scores and their pass rates. The passing threshold was a 70%, which is common for CPTs. So for those who are interested, the URL for the questionnaire and the technical proficiency quiz are below. So you're welcome to take a look at it and even take the assessment if you like. So the first thing that I wanted to call out was that the study was not powerful enough to yield any definitive and conclusive results, and that is because the sample size is not large enough to make any kind of a definitive statement. However, the study did yield results that really weren't all that surprising. So the three things that I wanted to assess were whether there were differences in pass rates across the levels of education, across the levels of income, and of course across the different types of professions, right? So with regard to education, the group of subjects with degrees had a pass rate above 80%, whereas the group of subjects who did not have a degree did not. When split into groups with a bachelor's degree and higher versus lower than a bachelor's degree, the results were consistent. Now, when analyzing technical profession versus non-technical profession, the subjects who responded that they had a technical profession had pass rates that exceeded 80%. Those who responded that they did not have a technical profession did not have pass rates that were nearly as high. When looking at income, the average scores between the low, middle, and high income groups were fairly similar. But pass rates for middle and high income respondents exceeded 80%, as opposed to low income subjects who had lower pass rates. So, for any of the students that are looking to take this type of research one step further in future iterations of this course, I definitely recommend looking into other factors that could potentially have a more impact on technical proficiency. So there are some additional demographics questions on the questionnaire that look into marital status, whether a subject has children or not, and how much they use technology during their work and leisure time. These types of things might have more of an impact on technical proficiency. So I definitely recommend looking into things like that. Definitely attempt to perform a more powerful study by getting an adequate sample size would definitely be ideal. I'd also definitely recommend finding a broader assessment for technical proficiency, something that looks beyond just basic knowledge of computers, maybe mobile applications and that sort of thing. And finally, I'd recommend performing more in-depth research on the behaviors within low-income group, lower levels of education, and the group with a non-technical profession that drive their levels of proficiency in technology. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation.